I'm Dr. Thomas Webb. I am a medical doctor working as a medical registrar, longevity medicine and sports medicine. Over the last few years, I've worked with doctors, 7- and 8-figure founders, executives, and other high-performing professionals, helping them improve their health, energy, fitness, recovery, and long-term performance so they can continue to operate at a high level without neglecting themselves. Today, I help doctors just like myself because I know the problems, the barriers that we go through. For this video, I want to talk about something that's a little more personal because there was a period of my own life where from the outside things looked like they were going pretty well. I was progressing professionally in my career, just stepped up to medical registrar in Australia. I was building things, I was achieving goals, working on my fitness, had good friends, etc. I was doing many of the things I'd spent years working towards. I wasn't enjoying my life very much though, if I was honest with myself. Because what's interesting is that if you had met me during that period, you probably wouldn't have called it burned out. It didn't really look like that. I certainly didn't feel like that at the time. I was still functioning. I was still working, turning up, and doing a pretty decent level. I was still ambitious. I still had goals. I was still doing many of the things society would associate with success. But underneath all of that, something was slowly disappearing. And I don't think I realized what it was until much later on. The thing I was losing wasn't my career. It wasn't my intelligence. It wasn't my work ethic. It was myself, my sense of my own identity outside of being a doctor. And that sounds dramatic until you've experienced it yourself. Because what happens to a lot of doctors isn't that they suddenly fall apart. It's much more subtle than that. It's much more insidious, happens over a long period of time. You gradually stop doing the things that have nothing to do with medicine. You stop prioritizing experiences. You stop pursuing your other interests or focusing on your health, your fitness. You stop investing in these new friendships. Stop seeking adventure. And you stop making time for the things that once made you feel alive. Not because you're consciously deciding this, but because medicine kind of has this knack of eating you up, demanding all of your energy, all of your attention. The training is demanding, the responsibility is demanding, and the emotional burden is demanding as well. Before you know it, your entire identity becomes wrapped around being this one-dimensional doctor. I see this all the time. In fact, one of the reasons I wanted to make this video is because I've had versions of this conversation with countless doctors over the years, and especially, to be honest, over the last few months, because I'm collecting this research, this data, so I can give the best service to serve this problem. They will tell me the same things. The patterns seem to emerge. They feel exhausted, they're unmotivated, they're stuck, or sometimes they describe this disconnection feeling. Often they're looking for some complicated explanation, a hormone issue, a productivity issue, or a motivation issue. But when we start digging deeper, a very different picture begins to emerge. Many of them haven't actually lost their ability to perform. They've lost their connection to the parts of life that make performance worthwhile. And I think that's a very important distinction, because one of the biggest mistakes I made was assuming that energy was a purely physical thing. I thought feeling better was mostly about sleeping more, training better, eating better, and improving my overall health. Now, don't get me wrong, those things matter enormously, but eventually I realized that human energy is much more complicated than just that. Over the years, I've become increasingly convinced that there are multiple forms of energy that determine how we experience our lives. There's physical energy, mental energy, emotional and social energy as well, and what some people would call maybe spiritual energy. Although I prefer to think this as meaning, purpose, fulfillment. The problem is that most doctors only pay attention to the first one, physical energy, or sometimes maybe mental energy as well. And that's understandable. We're trained to think about biology. We know the systems of health. We're trained to look for physiological explanations. But I remember going through a period where my physical health was actually decently good. My fitness was probably better than most, still running sub 25Ks. I was training, my nutrition was in a good place. My blood work even looked good. There was no problems. I remember thinking, what is my problem? I'm low in energy here. Maybe I'm iron deficient. I was vegetarian at the time, but my blood was really good. No issues there. But the problem with me was my emotional energy had been drained for a number of years. My social energy had been neglected, and my sense of identity outside of medicine had become incredibly weak. No amount of extra sleep was going to solve that. One of the most influential concepts that I've come across in my own burnout research is something called emotional exhaustion, and it's one of the core components of physician burnout or doctor burnout. What's fascinating is that emotional exhaustion often gets mistaken for physical fatigue. People say they're tired, but when you explore it further, when they're actually describing it, it's something very different. They're describing the feeling of carrying responsibility for far too long without sufficient recovery. They're describing the cumulative effect of difficult conversations, constant decision making, uncertainty in their job, pressure, expectations, and emotional labor. And the reason this matters is because the solution is different. If you're physically exhausted, sleep will help. If you're emotionally exhausted, sleep helps a little, but it's rarely the thing that actually solves the problem. That's why so many doctors take time off and come back feeling exactly the same. The problem was never a lack of free time. The problem was that the systems responsible for replenishing emotional energy had been neglected for a period of time. Looking back, that's exactly what happened to me and was one of the biggest contributions to how I felt. Medicine had become such a dominant force in my life that almost everything else had gradually shrunk around it. My sense of identity revolved completely around being a doctor and my performance at work. And the scary part is that it can happen slowly enough for it to feel normal, for you to almost not notice this. And that's something I want you to think about. Just because something feels normal doesn't mean it's healthy. Just because you're surviving, just because you're functioning, doesn't mean you're at your best. One of the most dangerous features of medicine is how quickly people can adapt to this lower level of function, this lower level of sense of well-being. The workload becomes normal, the stress becomes normal. You see it in your colleagues, you see it in your working environment, and you just accept this as part of being a doctor. Maybe justify it as sacrifice. The emotional burden can become normal, the exhaustion can become normal. The loss of personal time also becomes normal. Eventually you stop questioning it. You simply assume this is what life is supposed to feel like as a doctor. And that's where many doctors get stuck, because once something becomes normal, you stop trying to change it. The turning point for me came when I started asking a different question. Instead of asking why I felt so depleted, I started asking where my energy was actually going. And that question changed quite a lot, because for the first time I stopped viewing energy as a single resource. I started viewing it as a system. I realized that physical energy was one piece of the puzzle. I realized that mental energy was constantly being pulled by endless context switching and information overload. I realized my emotional energy was being consumed faster than I was replenishing it. And I realized my social energy had become almost neglected or non-existent. And perhaps most importantly, I realized that my life had become heavily focused on achievement, on career progression, on doing a good job at work, at the expense of a lot of these other important areas of my life. That's a difficult thing to admit, particularly for high performers, because we are conditioned to value achievement, we're conditioned to pursue goals, we're conditioned to optimize for things. But one thing I've learned from working with successful founders is that many of the happiest and high performing people, sometimes these guys have 7 to 8 figure businesses that they own, that they run, they have hundreds of employees. They're simply not just productive, they're engaged with life. They have other interests outside of work. They have relationships, they have things they care about that exist not solely just for the purpose of their career, their business, their work. And they actually view these things as things that help them be a high performer, things that help their business, things that help their career. They don't talk about biohacks. They talk about relationships. They talk about their social life. They talk about their hobbies that they have. Yet medicine often erodes these things, the very thing that protects us, that gives us a sense of identity outside of work, that makes us feel human, that connects us to other things and hobbies. This goes away, and life can become crowded as a doctor. It can become single-minded, one-dimensional. Years can pass and suddenly somebody realizes they haven't properly connected with the people they care about in months. Same thing happens with novelty. Another area that I think is massively underestimated is the brain responds incredibly well to novelty. New environments, new challenges, new experiences, new skills. Novelty increases your engagement. It increases motivation. It reminds us that life is larger than our daily routines. And this was one of the reasons that when I went through this, I was seeking out this novelty. I moved into a van to have that experience. And that was part of my story. But the van wasn't really about travel. It wasn't about escaping medicine. It was about reconnecting with curiosity, reconnecting with adventure, reconnecting with a sense of life that's outside just being a doctor, serving others and reacting to problems. Because eventually I realized that the solution wasn't simply becoming a better doctor. The solution was becoming a fuller human being that could actually serve how I turned up to shifts, serve my energy, serve my sense of fulfillment and purpose. And that's a lesson I wish somebody had taught me years earlier. Now, over on YouTube, I can't tailor your energy profile for you, but this is something I teach in much greater depth inside my program one-on-one, so I can give you that personalized roadmap specifically designed for your bottlenecks. So if you want a bit of clarity on that, then you can book a call in the description. The goal here isn't to apply generic advice. The goal is to identify where your energy is actually leaking for you and then systematically rebuild those areas of life so that performance becomes sustainable for you rather than something you have to constantly force and chase after. If you're watching this and you're feeling depleted, I want to leave you with something practical, something you can take away from this video. Take 10 minutes this week and audit your life honestly. Ask yourself where you're gaining energy and where you're losing it, physically, mentally, emotionally, socially. Because most people already know where the problem is, they've just never stopped long enough to look at it. And if there's one thing I'd like you to take away from this video, it's this. The goal isn't to become a machine. The goal isn't to work harder. The goal isn't to do better or put more pressure on yourself. The goal is to build a life that gives you energy rather than constantly taking it away from you. Giving you the energy so you can be a better doctor, so you can perform better, so you can do better for your patients. And if you neglect this for long enough, you might find yourself succeeding professionally, doing the right things, but you might find yourself feeling increasingly disconnected and maybe just a feeling that you can do more, have more energy, be a better version of yourself at work and outside of work. I've been there, many doctors have been there. You're not alone if you're experiencing this, and thankfully it's a place you can come back from. So thank you for being here, and I will see you on the next one.